I want to just say as well that this this workshop isn't necessarily intended to present polished work, and it's also very much applied ontology, and it's also very much trying to find out how organizations are actually taking up ontology on their side of the fence. So there are a couple of talks this afternoon that are a bit more technical and nerdy ontology, but there are others just trying to tackle basic stuff like synonymy and mapping over to other databases. And so with that, I will now introduce Sarah. So Sarah Brinkley is actually leading off the show, and she is currently engaged as a postdoc at the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. She has a well-fermented and caffeinated background
I like that.
in food science with experience in chemistry and winemaking, PhD at Texas A&M in horticultural science, and affiliation with the Center for Coffee Research and Education, and work at the Norman Borlaug Institute for International Agriculture and Development. I'll let you introduce what you talked about. Take it away. Oh, one other thing. I have a document I'm going to put in the chat where we can place questions for each presenter, and we'll at least take a couple of questions after each presentation, and then see if we have some pool time at the end of it. Okay. So take it away.
All right. So hopefully y'all are seeing my screen and seeing the right screen. That's good on your side. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for having me speak at the workshop today. I'm Sarah Brinkley, and I won't be talking about my well-caffeinated and fermented background today, but I will be talking about using this awesome FoodOn tool to harmonize metadata with the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. And so I would like to say that Dr. Jenny Gallo Franco was supposed to be giving this talk today, and unfortunately her visa was not approved to come from Colombia, so I'll be filling her shoes. And this work is building off of a huge team, which includes Marie, Angelique, and Elizabeth, and all of us are situated at the Co-Secretariat of the Periodic Table of Food, which happens to be on the Biodiversity International Alliance with CIAT, part of a larger consortium of global ag research consortia. So basically, the Periodic Table of Food is an initiative, a global initiative to create an open and openly accessible global resource or repository of food composition data. And this is really part of a global network to understand the complexity in all the world's edible biodiversity. And the metadata are really the key to linking food composition with planetary health. So not only are we interested in food composition data for the sake of food composition data, but we're also interested in understanding how variation in food composition exists due to things like climate change, system of production, could be regenerative ag practice, could also be ecological or biocultural conditions, could also be climate change, and how all of those relate to not only human health and nutrition, but also planetary health. And if we're going to make this big overarching goal work, we really need to have well curated and accurate, as well as interoperable metadata, which is a huge part of how FoodOn comes into this. So I had mentioned that it's part of PTFI is part of a global initiative, and so we're made up of our core center, which is at Fort Collins at Colorado State, and that would kind of be the hub of the spokes of our wheel. Would be the centers of excellence, and we've got centers of excellence in every continent region around the world. That includes our more university partners, centers of excellence, as well as national labs, like we have NARO in Japan, and the National Public Health and Nutrition Institute in Mexico, as well as some other collaborators. Soon we'll get to visit the University of South Pacific, Fiji, to help them. But the real key here, the technology that we're building, is this decentralized system of food collection paired with super reproducible, harmonizable data analysis and data processing. And so to show you a little bit of a need for that system of standardization, we were basically conducting this survey study comparing apples to apples, where we sent out apples as well as many other food samples to some of the top food composition labs, metabolomics labs, open technology labs in the US. So labs A, B, and C. As you can tell from the figure on the left-hand side, they had highly reproducible in-lab analyses with a super linear replicate 1 versus replicate 2. However, when we compared data between labs, we found that only 14 compounds were comparable out of 927 total compounds analyzed in these apple samples. We also did this for potato and eggplant and carrot and many others, and saw a very similar story. And so that really gets at the heart of our core technology that we're developing, which is an omics suite of technologies or analytical tools where we use not only routine systems of intake processing of foods, but also extraction protocols. We use standardized reagents, which include internal retention time standards, as well as authentic library annotations and for a more quantitative look. We're also doing an untargeted analysis. That's part of our pipeline. And then all of that is fed into an open centralized data pipeline. So just thinking about our metabolomics offering, which we have an entire suite of omics technologies, just looking at the metabolomics side of it, we will take LCMS and MSMS, also spectra, annotate features, and provide quantitation as well as process and quality control. So here is sort of like an overall visual of every stage from sample collection, sample management through our data pipeline, the databases that we'll be featuring, as well as the sort of user interface that comes out of that. I'll spend most of the time, the rest of this remainder of this talk, talking about sample management and metadata, and that comes at the very beginning, all the way through to our different user interfaces, where that might be like our GNPS dashboard for folks who are used to using raw mass spectral data to draw their own conclusions. We'll also have Big Sky and a precision medicine platform for those who need a little bit more polished data to work with. And we'll also have very user-friendly consumer or folks who aren't as familiar with mass spec data outputs, nice captured data stories packaged up for them. So it all begins with metadata collection. So at the PTFI, we're really working towards using FAIR and also CARE data management principles. We've devised a streamlined set of core metadata that are really unique to answering those questions about like food variation due to different, whether that's food processing or environmental conditions. We're coupling our in-house metadata with internationally recognized data standards like FoodOn and other ontologies, and gathering data at the point of production or point of collection with this nifty new food sample form that you see before you, which comes with like tooltips of exactly what those metadata definitions are. And this all feeds into a centralized sample management system, which also allows for a downstream curation of metadata, things like ontological terms. So here is a preview of our core metadata. And so these are sort of the in-house metadata that I had mentioned. And those are categorized by collection event, food specimen collection, and food sample collection. So those are things like, where was the food grown or harvested in terms of latitude and longitude. So GPS coordinates that could be linked to other databases, looking at like precipitation type data or data on health outcomes based on perhaps a food desert where you reside is lacking in some particular type of food or particular type of nutrient density. We're also collecting things like our specimen food product name, as well as a food product IRI, that's our FoodOn term, as well as a sample food product IRI and a sample food product name. So a little bit of the feedback from the abstract that we submitted is actually what is the hierarchy of our or dependency of our sample versus specimen naming. So this really works in the FreezerWorks sample management software. So we do use a proprietary sample management platform that's also taken up by folks at like the CDC, other more like public sector users. So we did have to sort of retrofit their scheme, which was taking patient as the top level with sample aliquot tests and test results flowing from that. So for us, we have our maple leaf, since we're in Canada, representing our specimen. So a specimen could be animal or plant product, fungi, and then we have samples derived from specimen, and then aliquots, which would be just replicates of samples. So to think about an analogy, we would look at the carrot being the entire specimen, and then a sample could then be a division or a part of that specimen. So the carrot root versus the carrot tops. Or that could also take on food processing. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. This really shows the importance for us about why we're not just using like NCBI taxon, that we're really trying to go beyond that and talk about like food processing in different parts of foods. So using the NCBI taxonomy, we can get cherries, and we can then differentiate whether we're talking about or like which species, or sorry, the species Prunus, and which subspecies we're interested in, but that doesn't really tell us anything about the food processing itself. So if we take one of those subspecies of cherry, the sour cherry, we are able to sort of nest our different levels of sample preparation. So in the case of the sour cherry, our specimen would be the sour cherry, and then a dried cherry would be a sample. So can't really see my cursor. So let's just say we're taking that, the specimen, which is sour cherry, and we're wondering what the method of preparation or the sample preparation was for that specimen, which is sour cherry. We would say that the whole raw specimen would be the specimen preparation, and then we could further define the sample preparation as either the same as the specimen or different from the specimen. So that could be cooked, processed, or unknown would be our options. Diving down a little bit deeper, we have a second core metadata term. So not just sample preparation, but also sample preparation method that defines what that sample preparation is. So if we said that the sample preparation was the same as specimen, then we would just draw that term. So in the case of the raw cherry, we would just draw raw from the specimen. But if the sample preparation was different from the specimen, in this case processed, we would take it further and define how it was processed. And this is a multi-select list. So you can have like multiple types of sample processing. So it could be perhaps like fermented and then grilled, or smoked and then dried, something like that. So in this case, with our sour cherry example, it was just dried. So that would be our metadata selection for sample preparation. All right, so then we would basically take our in-house core metadata and then map those over to FoodOn where necessary. So in the case of the sour cherry, that's whole and raw, we would take that FoodOn ontological term. We're really excited to lean into the work that you all are interested in doing and expanding on your food processing types. So having sour cherry modified by some other food processing term, rather than just taking a FoodOn term that is describing the raw cherry as one single identifier. So just kind of in conclusion, we have been able to, what we're calling our curation process, we've been able to curate 950 foods to this point. That's not necessarily 950 unique foods. So they are unique in that they would have like different sort of food composition variation, but we could have like 100 apples in there right now, for example. But anyhow, we were able to curate in our sample management system 500 foods, which included the specimen organism, IRI, which is the NCBI taxa, the specimen organism name, which is just a scientific name, specimen food product, IRI, which is the FoodOn term at the specimen level, and then the FoodOn term at the sample level is the sample food product, IRI, and then all of our associated core metadata, which resulted in 80 term requests from the FoodOn community. And I've got those, if you guys are curious in the Q&A, to pull those up to take a peek. Just looking forward to future directions, we have about 1,600 inspirational foods that we're interested in curating and then also adding to our database. Another feedback question from our abstract was, FoodOn the only ontology that we're using? No, so we're also using the agro ontology, which was developed by the CGIAR big data platform, and we're also trying to modify the agro ontology and kind of retrofit that for regenerative ag practices. So trying to take some of the agro terms, but also things like perennial woody or perennial herbaceous, and sort of like roll those up into perhaps like in-house classifications of different regenerative agricultural practices, trying to get at how agriculture practice varies food composition. We've got some recently passed milestones. Just last month, we did our stakeholder data preview, which is really like our first launch to the world of what we're doing behind the scenes at PTFI. In October, we'll be looking out for our global data preview. We'll make our data more public. And then we'll have a global launch of the food data platform. So the data will be accessible and folks can start playing with all of this data by then and beyond. So kind of in conclusion, I'll just leave you all with some really lovely food photos from our chef activist, Alejandra Schrader. She's our PTFI ambassador, and she does plant-based cooking. She's got a low carbon cookbook out, and she's actually submitting whole meals to our periodic table of food database. So kind of everything I talked about today was like very minimally processed foods, but we're also interested in looking at the food composition and how food molecules can be more integrative, because we don't usually just eat single raw food components, but whole meals. So these are some photos from her cookbook. So I think that's it for now. I do maybe also have like a little bit of a preview I could do of some of our metadata in action. Load. So get back to this a little bit. So I popped a link in here. Um, so this is our marker lab. So this is not public just yet, so maybe somewhat proprietary, but I did want you all to kind of have a vision for what the marker lab is, which is that interface where you'll be able to play with the food composition data. And this is kind of the back end that we've got, just to kind of highlight how we're using the FoodOn ontological terms, and all of the kind of like subsequent, sort of the subsequent hierarchies for, oh, I think I should be on this tab actually. Oh, that is the metadata. Yeah, okay, here it is. Just start to look at. So we use basically like FoodOn level 1, which would be like the plant food product name, food product, the plant fruit food product, then the solanaceous fruit product. We're talking about tomato here, and then tomato food product. So this is kind of like the back end of classification for all of our foods, and then we're able to make like comparisons based on FoodOn level. So if we're looking at a particular tomato sample, we could look at it in reference to like a tomato food product, or maybe just all of the tomatoes on like vine ripened tomatoes on the vine that we've got in our database. And this will show you the relative abundance of compounds, whether it's sort of like enriched or not. And we can maybe look at like calcium, so that's comparing this one particular tomato to all of the tomatoes on the vine that we have in our database. This particular one tomato has a Z-score of 1.13, so basically like one standard deviation higher or enriched in calcium than all of the tomatoes that we have in our database right now. And so then there's additional like sample level information that you can find out about said tomato, where it was analyzed, what omics platform it was analyzed on, and that kind of thing. So this is coming straight from our stakeholders data preview, hot off the presses. So yeah.
So Sarah, that's pretty impressive. And just a very short question, then I see some others lined up. PTF5 was started like less than 2 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, so I joined in November of 2022, and basically got introduced to FoodOn like a couple of months ago, I think in March-ish. And just PTI in general has, we're on a June cycle, so we're just rolling into our third year of the funding cycle. So yeah,
okay,
pretty brand new.
Right. I was thinking it took a lot longer for the labs to have to synchronize technology and all of that, but you guys have rolled out some kind of package, standard package.
Yes, and so that's a really good question. So everything that I've showed you so far is kind of data that are collected at our core lab or our other validation labs. So we have collaborators at UC Davis and Vanderbilt and the Carbohydrate Research Complex in UGA in Georgia. And so our centers of excellence are just now rolling out those core technologies. And so we've had a huge hurdle of like import laws to navigate for all, like every single country has to have their own procedures, but they are just now getting their kits of those internal retention time standards, some reference food products to make sure that their machines are in alignment with our core lab, and the standard references also. Yeah.
Online and here. What I'd like to do is prioritize ontology related questions.
Damion, we're losing your audio.
Okay, I'll lean over here. I'd like to prioritize ontology related questions and then shift back to one technical question about the rest of the stuff from each online person, if that's all right. So can we start in the room?
Yeah, I feel so much.
Right.
Slide 14. Yeah,
You might have to up here.
no, it's okay. Let's see.
Here, so that's, I
Oh,
think that's the
that's the problem.
Yeah, so if you go to slide 14, has to do something with the labeling and the naming. I think it was the cherry. Yeah. So we have here sour cherry, and then you have whole roll. Obviously, that is not the whole name. You have a description that goes with the name. And my question is, why do you really want to call it that name? That it really actually is saying this is a whole roll sour cherry as one class or one entity type, or if you talk about Barry Smith's way, universal. Is it a universal, or you're talking about a cherry that has a set of properties, and you would represent a set of properties, and this is just a quick hack that you don't have to drill down into the details and just for visualization convenience.
Right. I should handle that.
Yeah, I also have my own answer, but go for it.
Handle it quickly. Our entities have minimal information with them. So a whole raw sour cherry means it has characteristic quality raw. It has a taxonomy cherry, and it's a whole thing. And those are just the 3 traits, and they are all packed right into that entity.
Yeah, so, but that is fine, but you don't want to put that in the label because then
I'm trying to. Well, the problem with FoodOn is that we have a whole bunch of terms that are very, very similar. So we actually have to put it in the label somehow. Otherwise, you can't actually discriminate based on label.
If you want to put it in the label, you put it in the whole label.
Yeah, I'm not leaning on the OWL ontology. I'm not leaning on the OWL ontology labels to do natural language processing. I'm leaning on synonymy and other terms for that. Back to you.
Cool. Yeah, I would just say that, like, for our purposes, we don't necessarily use that label either. That's how we've developed our core metadata. So we would use our food product name, like specimen or sample food product name. So.
Okay, so next online, Matthew, would you like to pitch one of your questions?
Sure. Thanks. Lots of questions. Probably don't have time to get to all of them.
No, but we have time for one. We only have time for one.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to point Sarah to the document so that maybe that we could get some answers offline through the day or something like that. But the one question I will ask from the list that I was making when I was watching here, because you wanted something specifically ontology, Damion. So my question is really about, you mentioned about NCBI taxon and about processing method. That all makes sense. Where I know that FoodOn has some gaps, and what I'm wondering about how you're addressing it is in varieties and cultivars. So the cherry was an example where actually I think those are different species of cherry. But yeah, but with apples, for instance, we have the same species of apple, but we have 20 different varieties, and then we've got different cultivars as well, and then we've got things that have been put on other rootstock for growing things like that. So how are you guys taking all of that into consideration?
So we, for our core metadata, are capturing variety level information. So we've made like the scientific organism name mandatory. So at a very minimum, we want to know from like our users what the scientific name is. We are collecting variety level information, but it's not necessarily mandatory. It's definitely encouraged. And then I think, so those are actually some of the contributions that we've even made to FoodOn, knowing that variety isn't like across the board. So I think these are animals. I don't know if I can grab the tab down there. Plant parts. So I think a lot of it is like hierarchical stuff, but we had maybe some like variety suggestions as well, if I can find any. maybe not. Black beauty berry versus American beauty berry.
Right. So,
Yep.
so have you developed a mechanism for contributing these terms back into FoodOn?
Yes.
This is the table. All of those IDs are brand new for these PTFI terms. But there's another question behind that. There are over 900 apple cultivars. So we have other people like Troy and other volunteers showing up. Troy is the first one in that regard to take a closer look at the ability to grab information from Wikipedia that's storing a lot of these, this kind of level of information into FoodOn. So totally interested in that, but that has to be a volunteer or project related drive.
Why?
Why? Well, mandates. Got a mandate to cover Apple, but we need to be given the mandate and the money for curation to handle those larger, projects.
Oh, I see. I thought you were saying that entering the terms that PTFI has noticed are missing needs a separate mandate, but I would think that mandate comes from PTFI itself.
Yep. No, got that. That's why we've got new IDs for all of these terms in the hopper. But I'm saying cultivars. If we get 900 cultivars, that's a bit of a project.
It is, but I would think that it would be of the interest of PTFI to find these other sources to put in, so that it's not just a one-off every time you're trying to go there and realize, oh, it's not there. That would actually be more efficient for PTFI to put some amount of energy into these other sources of information where the cultivars can be found in mass. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know of any that exist in mass personally.
Well, like Wikidata is a great place where these things can be found. That kind of thing. And peach associations or whatever. I don't know what your list of foods is. That was one of my other questions, was that list of foods and who decides when that happens. But I don't want to take up too much time, but I would think that coming up with a systematic way of entering these terms as opposed to sort of the opportunistic we're looking at this food and it's not there kind of thing, might be helpful.
Okay. A question from Robert, and then we'll move to Laurette. If you have a short question, we're running out of time. We have to move to the next presenter soon. So quick questions from two people. Robert.
Myself, Damion, that Robert?
Yep, that Robert, sorry.
Okay, I was just asking, as you're doing this analysis, and since we eat food and flavor is one of our interests, are you using the mass spectrometer? So are you capturing all the flavorful compounds, such as like the volatile organic compounds? And is there a way, since that's where in that database, you're able to sort and say, let me see what the flavor attributes are for this, as opposed to going through one by one?
Yeah, so our approach right now is to do both targeted and untargeted metabolomics. And so for the non-volatile portion of flavor, I think we could check that box. We are also developing we could call it flavoromics. I think I described it as aromatics in my core technology development slide, but we are working with Javeriana in Colombia, in Cali, Colombia, to develop the GCMS like volatile platform, but it's not what we're leading with, I would say. But then, if flavor is particularly of interest to you, you could conduct a demo plot working with sensory panels to look at flavor components. Or also, like you said, just filter of those non-volatiles, which are flavor active, perhaps based on literature, but it's not something we're particularly capturing, whether it's flavor active or not at this point.
Thank you very much.
Am I on, Damion?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, very good. I will be very quick. Congrats, Sarah, for the presentation. Very, very clear. And if I understanding correctly, that now you are working with FoodOn as one of the core building block in this metadata. Great. The question I will have, because we had Bruce German briefed us about a year ago, and that was one of the match I was hoping will happen. But for now, the question is that you have all of those international hubs, but are also food also come from and is consumed from around the country, the countries around the world in very different ways. How far are you in having integrated a bit of this international component into the food that you select, and a bit building on Matthew's question in what you collect on those food as well, so that it is really a world effort that are being deployed here?
Yeah, great question. So our small metadata team consists of myself, Jenny, who I mentioned, Elizabeth, and Marie. So that's maybe the North America, Southern America, and European side for a small subset of the world. We are taking a little bit of time to get our centers of excellence up to speed and analyzing their own foods and this decentralized approach. And so the part of our nomination list, that inspirational food list that I showed, was coming from those centers of excellence where they nominate foods of importance to them. I know we have a speaker today that's talking about the kind of like translation or like multiple food naming terms. So we would lean heavily on our centers of excellence, but we're also interested in expanding synonyms and perhaps other foods from other languages to coincide with what's already in FoodOn.
Thank you.
So thanks so much, Sarah, for this, and look forward to working with you more. Next up is Katherine, who's an information scientist working on the WikiFCD project, which aims to provide web access to food composition data sets. I'd have to actually tune in. Okay. But we're still getting that right. Yeah. Okay, can folks hear me online?
Yeah, even better now than we did before.
Folks hear? Can folks hear me online?
Yes.
Okay, and we don't have the room speaker here yet. Let me just check that quickly. Sound settings. And now can you, somebody can speak online?
I'll
Kat.
keep doing it. Yeah.
Okay. We're not getting the room speaker, which is a little bit tricky for the online questions. We'll see if we can sort that out. It was tricky getting audio set up here. So just check. Maybe out. Okay, actually try that. Katherine, can you say hello? Just to say hello for test?
Testing to say hello.
Very good. Okay, I figured it out then. Good. Just a sec. Right, okay, so I don't really have volume control, so you won't have to speak too loud. I think it's, I'll figure out where that is. Yes, so I was just reading my little intro, which is Dr. Katherine Thornton is an information scientist working on the WikiFCD project to provide web access. Yes, the WikiFCD Sparkle endpoint allows, no, this is actually my little, no, yes, this is your, yes, this is the blurb. This is the Sparkle, WikiFCD Sparkle endpoint allows food composition data to query this data in combination with data from Wikipedia or other RDF data sources on the web. So, Katherine, I'll make the screen big and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Damion. So on the title slide here in blue, you can see the link to a copy of these slides if you'd like to follow along with your own copy of the slides. The work that I'll be discussing today is collaborative work, and I'd like to acknowledge my collaborators without whom this work would not be possible. Dr. Mika Matsuzaki, who is a professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and a nutritional epidemiologist, and Kenneth Seals-Nutt, who is the software engineer on our team and who is responsible for the web app that I'm going to demo in a few minutes here. So a quick intro to WikiFCD. WikiFCD is a public online knowledge base of food composition data drawn from already published international food composition tables. All of the data is referenced back to the source publications where we found the original food composition values. And we have many multilingual labels for food items that we record in WikiFCD. We also have mappings to FoodOn and mappings to Wikidata. And at the bottom of this list here, you can find a link to the knowledge base if you'd like to take a look at it yourself. So why are we interested in the project that I'll be discussing today, sourcing multilingual labels primarily from Wikidata, but also from Wikipedia? Because WikiFCD is a global knowledge base, and we're hoping to increase the number of access points that will enable searching in additional languages beyond just English. And we are doing this to reduce data disparities. And we thought that since we're doing this work for WikiFCD, wouldn't it be great if we could potentially share these labels if they're of interest with FoodOn? Is it possible to source multilingual labels for food items with FoodOn identifiers from public knowledge graphs? Yes, it is possible, and we're going to show you some of the approaches that we took to doing this work. So to test out our data reuse from Wikidata and Wikipedia, we created a sample data set of 6 food items. They are apple, chocolate, rice, purslane, kale, and oregano. And we selected these to cover some really well-known food items and then some less commonly cited in the literature food items so that we could get a sense of how is the coverage of labels from some of the most popular food items to some of the less popular food items. And so we did this by looking at several different subsets of Wikidata, and also data from Wikipedia as recorded in Wikidata. And so a knowledge graph subset is just a portion of a knowledge graph. And we sourced multilingual labels from 5 different subgraphs of WikiFCD and also Wikidata. And so the reason that we looked at so many different subsets is we wanted to give a sense of the complexity of this data in Wikidata and in WikiFCD, where multilingual labels can be found in many different parts of Wikidata. And we were curious to see how these different subsets might compare to one another, and if by taking a simpler approach of just looking at a single subset, would we be missing out on valuable multilingual data? So the 5 subsets that we are looking at are Wikipedia article titles, Wikidata item labels, taxon common names, WikiFCD common names, and lexemes. So how is the coverage? Well, it varies. It varies by food item and it varies by subset. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot from a web app that I'm going to show you in just a minute for the food item apple. And this is the number of multilingual labels that we found in the Wikidata lexemes subset. And then if you compare that to the Wikidata item labels itself, these are, actually this is the Wikipedia article titles. So this is how many multilingual labels we found from all of the different language versions of Wikipedia, looking at the article title name for the food item apple. And so a colored in portion means that we do have a label there, and one that does not have color is that we did not find a label in that language. And so you can see, comparing lexemes, if you consult the paper, you can get a full description of what the lexeme subset is. I won't have time to go into that, but basically it's a portion of Wikidata where linguistic data is stored, and there are many different food items, the words relating to those food items that are found in the Wikidata lexeme namespace. So we did want to consult it, but the lexeme namespace in Wikidata is relatively new. It was rolled out several years later than the main part of the Wikidata knowledge base. And so editors just haven't had as much time to contribute data to the lexeme namespace. But Wikipedia being around for more than 20 years, we already have labels in more than 100 different language versions of Wikipedia for the food item apple. So the coverage really varies quite a bit, not just by food item, but also by subset. So now I'd like to show you the actual web app here. If you'd like to visit it, you can follow this address. It's publicly available on the web. And you can take a look at any of the food items from our sample data set. And you can see that for the Wikidata taxon common name, we actually only found 2 labels. But if we switch to the Wikipedia articles for chocolate, you can see there are many different labels. And the way that this web app works is all of the languages are spaced out on this grid, and we color it in if we did find a label in that language. In the language code is displayed in there just so you can get a look at it. But then if you hover over, you can see the label that we found itself, as well as the language that is represented by the language code. So if you're curious about these multilingual labels for this sample data set that we discuss in the paper, you can consult this application and explore it and see all of the different labels that we found. So if we switch over to the Wikidata labels, you can see that because all of the languages are laid out in the grid consistently, when I switch between the Wikipedia articles labels and the Wikidata item labels, you can see there are some differences. So this helped us understand that it really is beneficial to consult all of these different subsets of the knowledge base so that we can be sure that we get the greatest coverage possible. So I won't spend more time on looking at that now, but of course you can explore that on your own. And the link is here in the slides. If you have a copy of the slides, you can get to the web app from slide 11. So we found that the benefits of consulting multiple subsets are that we found a larger total number of labels. And then a real strength of this approach is that you can cross-check between subsets. So if you find a label in the Wikipedia article name subset, but you find a different label in the Lexeme subset, for example, then you know, we would want to know why that is, and are they both acceptable, or is one incorrect, and what is going on there. And because we have 5 different subsets, then it's easy to spot check and see if there is agreement across 4 of the subsets, say, then it's likely that we may want to consider that agreement across those 4 subsets to be a vote in favor of that label. And another benefit of consulting the different subsets here is some of the subsets from Wikidata and from WikiFCD actually contain references back to the source in which the label was found. And so we can use those references if we need to double check something. And then, of course, a label that can be traced back to a source through the reference is likely to be more trustworthy than a label that we don't know where it's coming from, and we're not able to check it for ourselves. So I'll close with that, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure if Damien's going to come on, but I see Matthew has a hand up. Matthew?
Yeah, let's just keep it going. I'm not sure what's happening with Damion. Really cool. I'm wondering your plan. I see for whoa. You're okay. I'm just going to keep talking. One of the examples that you showed, and I went to your multilingual table for the taxon common name. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entries in there, and this was in your multilingual table, and then Wikidata taxon common name. I'm just wondering how what your plans are for populating this, specifically perhaps with terms not just from FoodOn, but some of these other ones, like we were just having the discussion with PTFI, that maybe don't exist inside of FoodOn currently. Do you have a roadmap for what you're going to do there?
Well, our idea was to share this work with the FoodOn community and start a discussion of are these labels of interest? And then we would need to have a serious discussion about what steps of review might look like, because while this is an excellent source of multilingual labels, we would want to decide what criteria are we going to use to determine which of these labels would be acceptable and suitable for FoodOn, and which of them might not be.
Right. I guess I was asking a slightly different question, which really is about, because correct, maybe I'm not understanding correctly, but I'm wondering whether you have plans to increase WikiFCD, perhaps even outside of FoodOn, and what that looks like. Maybe FoodOn will have to catch up with what you're doing. It certainly seems like there's some catching up that FoodOn needs to do with PTFI, and I guess I'm wondering if you're also perhaps running into that, and how that might look.
Well, my understanding was that, so I don't know the full extent of every single multilingual label in FoodOn, but I guess we aren't consulting FoodOn for multilingual labels because we have this source of rich multilingual data from Wikidata. And so I think an open question is, what part of this data is not available through any of the aliases in FoodOn, and would it be of interest to FoodOn to have any of this data?
I see what you, yeah, I think, yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, I think totally it's interest, but that's my opinion. I mean, chime in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Anusha has a hand.
Yeah, can I speak?
I think so. Can you
Yeah,
guys
can
hear
you
us?
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just checking this. I was just checking these common names, and I saw that for in Wikidata, like, are we, first of all, do you have any plans to use the property which is for NCBI taxon, just to verify between the common names and species? Because one of the species, when I was checking, it was showing me for kale, like one of the label was for kale, but if you go for NCBI taxon, it gives you the species name for broccoli. So I mean, is there to use that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that and bringing it up. So what we have, we do actually have all of the NCBI identifiers in WikiFCD as well. But for the purpose of creating this sample data set, we just went with the Wikidata mapping so that all of the mappings would be consistent. Your idea is an excellent way to improve the accuracy here. But this is actually a mismatch in Wikidata. And so, yes, that is a problem, but the positive side of that challenge is that I think it's just a matter of time for some of the matches between the NCBI taxon identifier and the Wikidata items to be gradually improved. And so I think that is a community-wide process of many Wikidata editors working together. But yeah, I mean, you're pointing out a great challenge of in a knowledge base like Wikidata, where tens of thousands of external databases are all being aligned, there are still some messy areas, and there are some places where mistakes are present. And that's something that the community is always working on to clean up and improve. And it has gotten better over time, but yeah, a risk of this approach is that the data is only as good as the mappings that are currently recorded in Wikidata. So on the positive side, you can improve that by making edits to Wikidata. On the negative side, it can be a bit messy.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right that probably that's the issue with FCD. And this is something which can be explored in future as well. So yeah, it's more of a suggestion. But yeah, overall, it's great work. Thanks.
Yeah, much
and
appreciated.
we're hoping that by having the different subsets, maybe we can surface some of these problematic areas, and maybe that can create a list of items in Wikidata that we want to go and review and improve.
Yeah, I love the fact that your resource is manually curated. A decade of wiki editors working on this translation stuff, and B, FoodOn should externalize its synonymy management platform, and that includes multilingual stuff. So we're looking at this SSSOM standard for expressing synonyms and other language elements mapping to ontology terms. So would be neat if there's a confluence between your effort, which could also, I think Matthew is alluding to this, why this sounds like a standalone tool that's not just limited to the food domain, but could actually start marching into other domains too for checking the multilingual content of Wikipedia.
It certainly has many applications beyond just food.
Right. Okay. Maybe, is there one more question to pitch on the multilingual thing? Anybody? If not, then we move. Let's see. Any hands up? No. Okay, then I think we're ready to move to the next presentation by Anusha. And so I can say about Anusha, besides the fact that she works with me. Okay. I can say Anusha Sahar is an ontologist and scientific programmer working at the Center for Infectious Disease Genomics and One Health at Simon Fraser University. And she has her master's in bioinformatics and contributes to several lobofoundry ontologies, but is focused on FoodOn and related data standard development. Much of this work, including today's presentation, supports collaborations with USDA and FDA, which are adopting ontologies into their infrastructure. So with that prelude, over to you, Anusha.
I want to connect the audio and my presentation as well.
Okay.
Can I open it here?
Yeah, you could. That's right. So the link on your slideshow is the Google one. And I would just have to fetch it.
It was a little difficult to hear Anusha from where she's sitting.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think it would be fine once I'll be close to it.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. Is it any better?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
You're going to sit in front of Damien's machine. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be.
Okay, what was the name of your slideshow? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, just give me a second to figure it out.
Right.
So it's fine, but I'll also, okay, I can do that on my laptop then, because I have to share the hierarchy as well, which we will have to open separately in another window, because on slide it's not, the font is not very clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, let's see how it goes. Okay, so yeah, hello everyone, and today I'm going to share some of our most recent FoodOn work. A few months ago, we decided to expand our FoodOn food hierarchy with an added layer of formality and perfection to our meat side of the ontology. So this project, which is the development of a template-driven animal food product hierarchy with precise anatomical and butcher part references, actually proves that we are diligently working towards our goal, and we are almost there to achieve our target for this, for expanding our hierarchy with the diverse food products, meat food products especially. So this is a collaborative effort, and I am here speaking on the behalf of my team, which includes Damion Dooley, who is the ontology department lead and sitting beside me. And coming next is Kai Bloomberg, who is a postdoc fellow at USDA Methods and Application of Food Composition Lab. Last but no means the least is William Chow, who is the principal investigator of our lab at SIGO SFU. And I'm really thankful to all of them for their continuous support, guidance, and commendable efforts they have put into the project so far. So thank you so much. additionally, I would like to thank our FoodOn curation group, which is always a great help. And I think we really appreciate their comments, feedback, and valuable suggestions as well. So yeah, thanks everyone. And lastly, I would like to thank our funding agencies and partners who actually supported this project. Here are some of the highlights of this project. FoodOn is actually launched in 2016, where many of the food products were coming from, were imported from Lingual Siren database, which had over 9,000 food products. But at the same time, it was lacking many of the meat products. So FoodOn is now reorganizing, axiomatizing, and expanding our animal food product terms into an animal parts hierarchy with the help of a spreadsheet template. Oh, are you? No. Sorry, is it something wrong?
We can't see slides online right now.
Oh, you can't see that?
Oh, because we're looking here at this and I'm not screen sharing.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Okay. Right. Thanks for bringing that up. There we go.
Yeah, you will have to share screen from here, and it's here. Okay, maybe I can open my video here. So now everyone, I hope that everyone can see the screen now.
Yeah, we can see it online now. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so maybe I can start with from here. So starting with the main highlights of the project, the food ontology was actually launched in 2016, and with a significant number of beef, chicken, goat, pork, and other animal food product terms which were imported from the Lingual food composition thesaurus Siren database, which was composed of over 9,000 food products. In subsequent years, some attempt was made to manually injecting anatomical and taxonomic information into these minimalist entries, but this approach lacked rigor. So for that reason, FoodOn is now reorganizing, axiomatizing, and expanding the animal food product terms into an animal parts hierarchy with the help of a spreadsheet template, which actually itemize each anatomical part, which we are taking from the Uberon ontology or butchery carcass or meat cut, along with the animal taxons it pertains to. At the second step, there's a Python script which generates the core set of ontology terms from the spreadsheet, and it can be refreshed as new entries, parts, or taxons are entered into the spreadsheet. This animal hierarchy is augmented with manually curated terms for parts that are unique to a particular kind of animals, like, for example, pork belly or lamb chops or beef round steak, etc., etc. So this work is motivated by the mission to make FoodOn a lingua franca translation nexus for mapping between food-related digital assets, whether it is to provide categories for USDA single ingredient food nutrition data sets in collaboration with USDA's Food Data Central, or to match with European Food and Safety Authority Food X2 vocabulary of food products. We need to engineer FoodOn to have the required granularity of anatomical or more arbitrary butchery cuts. Okay, so maybe I can, so here is the updated FoodOn animals hierarchy, but the font is too small, and so maybe I'll just quickly share my screen for a moment and then switch back to a Damion screen. Okay, so this is the updated animal hierarchy we have. The hierarchy starts with the food material, which is a material entity and has some role in food. And it also includes non-organism materials, including, non-organism elements like including water or minerals. And underneath food material, we have food product. And a food product is the result of applying any process to the food material. And below that, we have multicellular organism. This is imported from Uberon, but this Uberon term have animal underneath where FoodOn. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So for this chicken whole is the example of this animal product, but now we have changed this chicken whole to chicken. And then we have under animal, we have carcass, which can be dead or alive. And this carcass is also coming from Uberon, but the Uberon carcass is mainly referencing to a whole carcass, which includes all the organs and skin. If beef carcass is an example of carcass, so this the row below you can see. So this is these are the instance examples. I mean, they are not meant to be comprehensive. These are just examples of all these things. So if I go to the right side, here we have organism material. So organism material is the mixture and collection of pieces. And we have underneath plant material and animal material. Plant material will have plant pieces, plant whole or pieces, and plant piece. Similarly, animal material will have animal pieces, animal whole or pieces, and animal piece. Here, animal pieces is a collection of one or more animal pieces, and FoodOn will maintain its existing animal whole or pieces. And it was introduced to accommodate the vague sample descriptions. So, but from now on, I think FoodOn will focus mainly on the singular plant or animal parts and will have a separate field for such vague samples or descriptions, from vague to the specific descriptions. Similarly, so now the third one is the animal piece, and underneath animal piece, it's a severed part of an animal which doesn't include the body product. And underneath animal piece, we have, it can include fat, cartilage, or skin. So animal piece have animal fat, animal blubber, animal organ, as you can see here. Beef fat is an example of animal fat. Beef liver is an example of animal liver organ. And similarly, I couldn't show it here, but animal organ is further divided into piece of animal organ and pieces of animal organ. Animal fat further has categories: animal seam fat, animal external fat. Then we have animal processed carcass. It is an animal carcass on which some processing has been done. Either it is it has been cleaned or butchered. Unlike Uberon carcass, which represents the whole carcass. And now coming to this middle space, which is another important branch coming underneath this animal piece. This is piece of animal meat. I missed showing pieces of animal meat, which includes meat like minced meat or ground meat. Under piece of animal meat, we have meat cut, and that's because there are, for anatomical parts, we use Uberon, but there are parts which are the delineated butchery cuts, arbitrary butchery cuts, for which we needed a parent class meat cut, which can accommodate classes like the primal cut, animal subprimal cut, and animal retail cut. And then animal retail cut further has animal steak, animal chop, and animal roast. For example, beef steak, which is an example of animal steak, beef chop, beef roast, or lamb roast, etc. So yeah, this is the animal. So these are all the terms which now are added in the new FoodOn template, which we are going, which I'll be showing again, the automation part.
5 minutes.
Oh, it's difficult. Okay, I'll try to wrap it up quickly. So, okay, can we share your screen again? So. Yeah, so. Okay, I can just quickly go through this process part because this is not exactly the part of this, but this is something which we will be considering in future. So here, one of the main question was that what part is not automated? One of the dividing line we had was whether we are dealing with meat that is raw. But if that's the case, how do we define that there are some set of processes we could do that we are allowed to do to this meat and we still keep it raw and we still keep it in our animal hierarchy? So behind all these name entities for kinds of meat and animal material, we have got processes going on. And here's a little picture that involves an Uberon carcass that is a body of multicellular organism that is no longer living. And the Uberon carcass is referencing to the whole creature, but the only ontological commitment is dead. We don't know if that carcass has been sitting around for days or months or completely dried out because of a dried or any other reason. So we in FoodOn need to add a second subclass that is animal carcass raw, or I should say a whole raw, and give claim that it has quality raw. But even that has a quality raw, we need to link it to a process that generated that. So FoodOn needs an animal killing process to link the two of them directly. And this also points out that we want to cover harvested material, some of which is food. Okay, so here the diagram shows that there are a lot of processes which intervene between all of these different nouns, what kind of processes are allowed and which ones are not allowed. And it's a kind of light dive into the whole world of butchery and animal slaughter. There are different processes for butchery cuts, depending on which kind of animal you are talking about. Like suppose in this picture, if you see, it starts from animal killing, and then we have animal carcass, and then there is a step animal bleeding from which we will be getting blood carcass, and then there is a next step which is animal skinning, and which is, so now if we talk with the perspective of butchery, then animal skinning is different from poultry picking. Similarly, we have that leads to after animal skinning, we have pre-evisceration carcass, and then we have some subclasses for the processed carcass. And then when you get that pre-evisceration carcass, and that has epidemiological considerations, because you need to have sterilization happening there. And finally, you split the carcass in half and you end up with the carcass side hanging in the refrigerator section of the slaughterhouse. And we can for sure say that it has still the quality raw. Question is that as long as all of this stuff has been done quickly enough, it's raw. But is it fresh? So this slide is describing exactly what raw food is and what processes can be said to have applied into this. It differs for plant and animal products. For example, in plants, green beans can be fresh and raw, or they can be dried and still can be called raw and not cooked. So I think we are still working on the first pass to consolidate the heat treatment and temperature reduction or cooling treatment, mainly Damion, I would say. An integration of these two maps, which Damion actually created, but still raw after various processes like freezing and drying are applied. Oh, that's
You're gonna have to skip a few slides.
Okay, let's skip it. Okay, so mainly I think the main the core of this presentation is the workflow which we have created for the automated creation of animal parts template. And in this slide, we are trying to move a little beyond the standard ontology development practices and trying to really help develop bigger or design patterns that can really get us to a more well-structured and consistent terminology. Because I just mentioned that in FoodOn Pass, a lot of things were brought in from Lingual, and those were typically manually curated, where one might add chicken legs, but they might not add frog legs. And so we want to be able to do is to have a system that can automate lots of classes that are pre-composed for a reason because someone just needed for a particular reason. So by leveraging a bit of scripting to help create template for us, demoing, so we are demoing this with animal part template. This animal part template takes two inputs, one of which is a species list, and it can be seen here. It has various species in it. So the top level is animal, and then we have chicken, turkey, etc., with all of its information such as taxonomy and what a template is being used in. And the other input we have is animal part template, and this animal part template is actually a tabular form of hierarchy, which I just showed you earlier. And those of who are familiar with ontology development workflows, it might look like this is a robot template, but actually, if you notice here, it is missing its second row of headers because it's not a robot template. This is a more of a generic template that Python script uses to generate more terms with when it crosses them with the species list, and it gives us an ability to specify what species we want to apply to given rows. And Kai is leading this automation component of the project. So this automated workflow crosses species list against animal part template, specifying the species to apply to given rows. Example, you can see all in the AWIS column. Like, for example, if there is shelled egg, maybe we want to produce shelled egg for chicken, but we don't want for AWIS, sorry, but we don't want to produce it for bovidae. Or example, animal material, we want to produce it for aves, but we don't. But in the bovidae, we just want it for particularly for antelope or beef. So that's why it generates. So this it will generate a robot template. Like crossing these two templates, it will generate this robot template that follows consistent pattern that can be updated in bulk. Like suppose if you have made a mistake, like missed a period or something, you can just go back, you can amend it, fix it, and just rerun this. So it will just amend all the definitions in bulk. And similarly, we have this also contains all the desired axioms and annotation properties and all of the intended combination. It will generate equivalence axioms by doing some pattern matching. For example, chicken material, the axiom is chicken material, animal material, and derives from some chicken. Finally, the generated robot template is compiled into OWL, and it will be merged into FoodOn. And here you can see the picture where we have animal material, and then we have chicken material underneath, which has chicken pieces, and same pattern for pork as well. So this is very useful in a sense that we can kind of systematically create all these combinations, but also we can add more combinations for species we are interested in compared to other species. That's why we want to move to a more automated template generation driven approach rather than managing robot templates one at a time. I will just skip one or two slides, and maybe I can just come to this slide where it's just to give you a highlight that apart from anatomical parts, we are also standardizing more arbitrarily delineated butchery cuts for which a separate meat cut parent is created. And that was actually created for mapping to USDA SR foods, which have over 600 or so meat products. So to map them to FoodOn, we just need to have these meat cut classes in FoodOn. And initially we thought of added these meat cuts in this standardized template, but it had few challenges. And the main is that meat is a vital component of many diets worldwide. And it is consumed in various forms, cut or preparation method. So the nomenclature for meat cut is not standardized, and the same cut of meat can have different names depending on the store, the region, or country. And such lack of uniformity creates confusion. So for this purpose, we have created these meat cuts outside of template in a separate robot template. And we have used the URMIS system for that, which is a standardized system, science-based identification system that provides meat industry with standard nomenclature for beef, pork, lamb, and veal. They're just with the red meat. So this system was developed actually to provide a retail meat cut identification system and a standardized nomenclature for every retail red meat item. And it's also using URMIS and IMPS system, which is used by USDA, which is institutional meat specific meat purchase specification. They were aligned in 2015. So I've tried to cross-check from both of them so to get a standardized label in FoodOn for all the meat cuts. This is somehow the this is the way they have used, like suppose the common name is porterhouse steak. The characteristics are the first name shows you the class, then the second is the subprimal, and the third is like if it has the bone or if it's boneless. So this is how the URMIS labeling works. I'm not going into description right now because we are already over time. Sorry for that. So in this way, we have curated around 400 meat cuts have been added so far in the robot table with all these axioms. And for only beef, 250 meat cuts have been added, and around 50 for lamb, 70 for pork, and 30 for meat cuts. And we are also adding for emu and ostrich, but those are from different sources because URMIS only provides nomenclature for the red meat. Other than that, there is, so here is just an example of how we are mapping USDA samples now with the new meat cuts. If you see here, there is a sample which is saying beef round, bottom round roast. So the first one is the class, which is beef. Round means this is the primal cut. Bottom round is the subprimal cut. Roast is the retail cut. And then the other descriptors are going into the bag of terms, which FoodOn will map directly to the ontology terms. And the new term is beef bottom round roast after considering. So these are all we have axiomatized it as like, we'll have round under primal and then beef bottom round under subprimal and roast under retail cuts. And also we have used this SSSOM mapping style for representing all these mappings for USDA. Like suppose there is, if you see in this picture, then these samples for suppose this is, if you see the sample, this is beef loin, top sirloin, petite roast and / fillet. So we have created beef top sirloin fillet, beef top sirloin petite roast, and these are the broad matches to these samples. And similarly, we have incorporated this mapping style for all these samples. And similarly, same goes for the seafood as well. Like this is flatfish, flounder, and sole species. So it's flounder raw and sole raw in FoodOn are the broad matches to this USDA sample. And a quick overview of the recap is that with the help of this standardized animal template and nomenclature for meat cuts, FoodOn aims to optimize the mapping of food vocabulary systems. And this work will maximize FoodOn's coverage of animal products, increase its cross-referencing, granularity, and will enhance data interoperability. And with that, the animal part classification update demonstrates also the importance of a similar template approach for plant term organization, which is already in progress now. So yeah, that's our next target. And that's all. Sorry for being so fast.
Thanks, Anusha. I am so appreciative that I work with people with such attention to detail, because that is exactly how the ontology business works, especially for food. Okay, so we are at 3:35. We have to do a hard close at 5. So what I would like to do is, if there are a couple of questions for Anusha, we'll take them, and then we'll just do a really fast 5-minute break, and I will launch in with my thing. And if you guys need to go take a longer break, you can just catch me on video later. So, okay.
Yeah, where is the document? I can't see.
Yeah, right. So the document. Here we go. So, yeah. Okay, from the floor. Let's start from the floor.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this slide. Is a term that references external fact like the screen. and the actual size of the tree or whatever is left over is given. So to that help or that brought to mind the idea of introducing descriptors for layers of fat or dimensions, so that let's say if you have a system that can do automatic recognition of analysis and recognition on parts, the way a human would be able to say, okay, I'm assessing that the amount of external fat on this piece of meat is this much. This looks like it's coming from a cow, so and it has this shape, so I'm
Okay.
gonna classify it as
Right, I think,
breast.
so FoodOn already has those fats with all those specifications. So we are just going to map it to the FoodOn terms, like, I don't exactly know the lean fat. And maybe I can share my screen if you have to open the document. Yeah.
Also, maybe I missed out because I was expecting each of his terms to be an axiom.
I can say the animal template is providing a hierarchy of parthood and some reference to butchery cuts or anatomy. When Anusha was showing that mapping to USDA samples, that was accomplishing a lesser goal, which was to just try to fit one of their samples into cross-reference to a FoodOn class.
So I can see the multi-version for the work.
Okay, it's two separate things presented there.
Are you talking about this line?
Oh, she can't see it.
Oh,
Before
okay,
sharing.
right.
Yes, but I think I understand now. There was something, you had a different use case in mind.
Yeah.
than what I said.
Yeah.
That's the mapping
Yeah.
challenge there.
Yeah, I wasn't here for.
Yeah, no worries. No, I appreciate your question. Thank you.
Okay, so online. In the chat, anything else coming in from there? No. Okay, so let's adjourn for 5 minutes. So 3:45, I'll come back and start up a Prezi, and we'll have 20 minutes and then 10 minutes for each of the remaining presentations. I'm Damion Dooley, Center for Infectious Disease Genomics, One Health, working with Anusha and others. Been curating FoodOn for a while, and I'm going to talk today about a recipe model and all the things that touches upon. So right into it. Going to talk about the just briefly, there's a recent FoodOn process model paper and another whole food process ontology group from last year, finally getting into publication, and a process by objective versus mechanism paper by Prenni. And a lot of the ideas here flow from and stem out of and depend on that work. So the first thing I'll do is just compare schema.org recipe model with what FoodOn is offering now, and also taking a look at what people have asked, what people have demanded that's over and beyond what that is. And then I'm going to illustrate by diving into a boiled carrots process modeling example and look at some stuff there. So Trini Naravani and I spent some time trying to look at an upper level hierarchy of processes that could be applied to food, but which are actually equally applicable to many other kinds of recipe activity of doing stuff to change stuff. And so just to say, this talk isn't really about the hierarchy of recipes, processes. It's just trying to exercise some examples of what we might do in a recipe. But there's a paper on this. I'll add the link to it in this slide later for reference if desired. So the product from a year ago on this food process ontology Ontology Requirements paper, which was taking a look at Obo Foundry's model of processing materials and looking at some other ontology work, such as the PO2 ontology that we'll hear about next, and SOSA, SSN sensor ontology, and the Provo, and some others that people have turned to for process modeling elements. All that work culminated in this one shot here of a recipe model that has its list of ingredients and devices and actions, things to do to the ingredients using the devices, and occupying or requiring some time to execute. But we got some feedback in two directions from this model. And the first feedback was there's no cultural stuff here about recipes. Where's the writing? Where's the pictures? Where are the multimedia elements? What kind of diet is it for? Who created it? Who's the author? All of that kind of stuff. So that was one direction. And then the other direction was there's too much this information baggage. You've abstracted this ingredient specification list when all you need to know are the actual inputs to the processes, because and then you can figure out what the ingredients are from that. So those two feedbacks led us to the next iteration. And so this will compare what Schema has to what FoodOn has in terms of that document and cultural multimedia context of a recipe. And so we've got FoodOn here adopting some, or having parallels to some Schema document model stuff about the name of a recipe, its description, when it was published. So we're offering to cover those in this DC terms vocabulary for keywords, subjects, and description, and so on. Those are annotations that don't have any logical repercussions. So, but moving into the general object properties, this is where logic can start to have a play. We are replacing or offering parallels to the Schema, things like the organization responsible for the recipe, or the person, the author, creator, cooking method, recipe category, a lot of free text things there, loosely organized. And we're offering instead the ontology view on these things, which is to pluck some categorical terms from existing ontologies to cover things like dietary pattern and whether this recipe answers to a nutrition intervention of some kind, what the ancestry of the recipe is. So that's making use of some Obo Foundry ontologies, but there isn't one that actually covers cultural events. So there's an opportunity to create another ontology to help in this effort. We're trying to cover schema.org with a number of more technical, how long does it take to cook? How long does it take to prep? Terms with FoodOn temporal duration terms that match those concepts. And thereby, with components of recipes, we hope to be able to calculate those more general durations out of any particular planned process. Now we get to the final core process model, which is back to that device specification, ingredient spec, and action specification. This is where when critics said, hey, you don't need those things. All you need are the actual engineering of the device and the planned process that's using it and the food material that's going in and out. All I need is that minimal model. So the rest of this presentation will just focus on that minimal model and see if it's what complexities lie therein. So we'll use the example of carrot preparation. Thing about these processes is they are taking inputs, but they're not just taking inputs, they're taking inputs in these states. It's kind of like the world is a certain way at one point in time. So carrot portioning, even, you've got a big pile of carrots and you're selecting exactly 2 kilograms or half a pound for your recipe. So that's a process. And what you get out of it is a new view of the world in which you've got two piles of things, and one conforms to some specification. So that's a scene, another state of affairs of the world with its own qualities. And the next step, carrot peeling. You're taking each of those carrots, peeling them away, and you end up with a new scene 3 with carrots that are raw and peeled. So here we're getting a little bit into the technicalities. We've got a pile of carrots. That's an object aggregate. Each member of that pile is an individual carrot, and each individual carrot is changing its characteristics as it goes through this process. Now you think, oh, who cares about that? Like, why are you so concerned about that? Well, you've just changed the mass of the carrots that you're doing your analytic sample on by peeling away stuff. That's one use case. The other, and you need to know that you need to remeasure what the mass is of the carrots. The other one is peels. Are peels actually waste, or can they be repurposed for something? So actually, if we have a process model that doesn't just consider things waste, but actual resources for reuse, that's helpful. So then carrot chopping. And that's where we get into this new world of pieces of things. So we've got an object aggregate, a big pile of carrots, now 2 piles of carrots. We're interested in one of them. That's an object aggregate. Now we've got them peeled. That's another object aggregate. We've got these different world states, and they're changing aspects. If we're representing this in a knowledge graph, they're changing relations and qualities of the object aggregate as it goes through. Now, we haven't even gotten to the pot yet. We're going to boil these carrots. What do we got to do? We need a cooking pot. We need a certain volume. We've got drinking water. We need a measure of that. We got to add the liquid to the container. An acid test of all this is to see if a robot can do it. And then the output of that is a cooking pot and drinking water, and there's a location in relation. So the knowledge graph has changed to have this located in thing. But then we got to take the carrots and use them plus that existing scene 5. We got to add carrots to that and end up with a pot of carrots, and then turn the heat on and so on. So breaking this recipe down into separate steps. Now, the thing about this is that the scenes have to be isolated from each other in a knowledge graph. So we talk about instances of these things not sharing the same instances. So this plant piece aggregate, going back into the slide, that's raw carrots and then raw peeled carrots. These have to have 2 IDs. They can't be considered the same ID, otherwise there's contradictions. So we're introducing this idea, which has been kicked around various ontology communities, of having an identifier, in this case, this carrots identifier, that sits above the fray, and we slowly add that it denotes each of these individual aggregates of carrots with their different characteristics over time. That's sort of the method of keeping track of stuff that's moving through industrial pipelines or moving through your kitchen. If you're barcoding everything, carrots would be the barcode, but the representation in the world in these different scenes, each scene could still be in your knowledge graph, but we would have this set of different identifiers and different characteristics for each pile. So it's 401. I'm going to just really zip through a little bit here and say that the mission is to be able to isolate each step, each process in a sort of generic template that can be reused as you get a new recipe. You bring in these little modules and you tie them together, and then you press compile button and you'll get out a bunch of IDs to track each of the things as you go through the processing. So here we got an entity type, which involves both the ingredients, the plant piece aggregate, and the balance, because there's a device for balancing the carrots to measure out how many you want. There's the actual process. and the output is another object aggregate. And its mass is different from the input. And so there's assertions made on what the output should be like. There are preconditions on what that step needs for input in order to do something useful to be executed. And there's the need for relative references so that you can connect outputs to inputs, which isn't so easy now, but being able to say an output has the very same thing as some other input, or an output is changed and now it derives from some input. In this case, a peeled carrot derives from a non. So that's the objective of this little project. Once we finesse how the model should work, producing these scenes through process modeling, that we can push a button and get a knowledge graph that actually captures every detail of the recipe. I'm out of time here, really, but suffice to say, you can dive in to each activity and discover it's not just a process, but you actually have to, or you can have the power to reference the devices that are doing the work. Or in the case of peeling, you can have an abstract level that just says you got one pile of input carrots, and then you have a couple of products, another pile of a certain kind, and then you got the peels sitting in another pile. But really, that's hiding an individual process of peeling each carrot. So if you wanted, you could skip down to that level and incorporate that in. And that's what robots people do. And that's why I was so interested in this conference, to see a number of other people presenting about that problem, or the problem of identity of these things as they move through and change characteristics, but you still want to call them the same pile of carrots logically by reference. Yeah, so the rest of the examples just continue on that product chain and get around to finally adding water to the pot. and then finally putting the carrots in. But you know, where this exposes interesting things is that pot is hot now. It's changed state. You've heated up the pot. You actually can't pick up the pot anymore. And that's actually where this ability to ID devices, not just ingredients, but devices, and change their state turns out to be just as useful. The pot is too hot to pick up, so it requires special treatment, or the pot is dirty, or the spoon is dirty. Now it has to go through a cleaning process. So our myopic view on the recipe itself now shifts to an infrastructure view, where each other device also needs to have care taken to it and be cleaned, and all these other systems that show up in your dishwasher or on the factory floor. So I'll wind it up there. I think that's actually the last slide. Yeah, so I'll stop share on that. And quickly take a few questions, and be happy to talk offline about that. I need feedback on this to see if I'm on the right track for some use cases. I will, just see. Yes, somebody talks about the handles. Yes, that's why they invented handles of certain cards. Right, I know. And then timing. Yeah, I skipped adding a little timing thing, but every single process, every blue box has a duration, say a minimum duration, maybe even a maximum duration, which also constrain the whole problem space. And then you can actually start to calculate start and stop times for any particular sub-processes, or calculate the overall process timing and dependencies. I haven't even looked at the work yet. Let me just go do that. First, to confirm, are folks seeing anything? I guess not, no. But, a question from the back, Anders. Sorry.
We also consider
Right, right. So I mentioned a few characteristics there, but basically the world's your oyster for choosing characteristics that are pertinent in the transition from one scene to another. So pedo ontology specializes in qualities of things, temperature, mass, volume. You can find a lot of vocabulary there, but we still have to add some more to pedo: taste, smell. Okay, so I think a recipe category. Well, in schema.org, they have recipe categories, and as I recall, it was like Italian or Chinese food or something. It might be, actually, I can't remember. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just checking questions online, but we should prep for the next presentation. Right. Trimming, part of the peeling. Yes, I know. See, Robert, I actually skipped the trimming thing, but there's also trimming. That's another step to squeeze in there. I know. Okay. And I know there's choices to make about drinking water, potable water, right? And I'd have to check to see if we have a category potable separate from drinking. Understood the complexity of those possibilities, especially where tap water isn't available. Okay, let me just screen share.
So hello everyone from here and from there. The focus of my presentation is a domain ontology, which we call it PO2 transform on, which is integrated in a workflow that is designed to publish data on repositories, following as much as possible the FAIR principle. And we built this an ecosystem of tools that assisting users in building the ontology, for annotating data, querying, and publishing in the context of the web semantic technologies. So my presentation, as I said, will focus on just on the PO2 transform on the domain ontology, and it's the whole ecosystem, and the current ontology is built during a project that we were involved in, and this is a slide in French, sorry. But what I want to show here is that we are only 4 authors presenting this, but it's a whole work, and we have some platform and computer scientists involved in RAE. The 4 authors it's Magali Weber, which is in research unit at INRAE, Patrice Buch, and myself and Stéphane Leroy, computer science engineering. And in the green part, you will have all the what we call expert domains that are specialized in different domain of that we used in our ontology. So this project, Dapasus Food, is a 3-year project. And this is the project that leads to the current state of our systems and the ontology. And just to illustrate how we use our collected data, it's a list of the use cases that were developed during this project. So the first one is to predict the performance of the field Mika filtration process under a wide range of operating condition and membrane technologies. And the data collected were connected with some Bayesian networks in order to answer to this question. The second use case was modeling the biocomposite packaging by integrating data and expert knowledge In this use case, probabilistic relation models were used. The third use case was about environmental assessment of food bioproducts and their processing, and we used life cycle assessment. And the fourth use case was to find relations between food properties and consumers' perception and preference, and the sensory analysis was used. So all those use cases give some publication. There is a list of data sets. We had some data papers also that came out of this project. And this is to illustrate the last part of the workflow that I mentioned. And once the context is set it up, let's move to some details about this domain ontology. The scope that we want to address with this new domain ontology is very, very large. We want to cover food, feed, bioproducts, and bio-waste engineering in a bioeconomy context and nexus-oriented approach for the food system. So the purposes are to design design of food quality from agricultural production to the impact of diets on health and on the environment, and design of biomass construction and deconstruction routes, and bio-waste recycling. It's a very ambitious scope, and but we think that we can address the problem starting from our experience in building what we have already. So the way we addressing this is to start from a core model that we developed in our team, which is called PO2. It is a model for transformation processes. It's at the beginning, it was meant for industrial process. So we need to consider input and outputs, observation, devices, and methods. Just for the beginning, this was the requirements. The first model was was not connected with the standard ontologies that existed, because it was the first was in 2016. But then we remastered, reorganized, renamed some concept, and now we are aligned with the SOSA SSM, with time ontology schema.org. So the core model is like a pattern, is like a way to do things in a very higher level. And if you want to build a domain ontology around this core model, you just need to specialize 7 classes: process, step, component, attribute, material, method, and scale. And as I said before, we developed some domain ontology in order to tackle with gel diaries, fabrication, sausage making, and things like this. So we know how to do this. We know what is needed in order to specialize PO2. And if you want to, just want to give you a very, very higher view of what is this model. So in blue, in the upper part, we have a process that contains one of more step, and the step is before the other one. It's the scene that Damion, a step is almost a scene that Damion did is a formal presentation. A step will have some inputs and some outputs that we call them components. A step contains some observation, and a step uses some actuator, sensor, procedure. And all of the components, observation, and actuators and procedure has a measure. And this measure is a table of data. And on the right hand, you can see what kind of data we can model in our in this model. We can, for instance, if you want to model 10 degrees Celsius, you will have as attribute temperature. The unit measurement will be degrees Celsius, and you will have 10 a value the same for the minimal maximum value. We can represent interval. We can represent also I don't remember just the English. It's moyen écart. And finally, we can represent also some symbolic concept. If you want to have fondant, the attribute is the texture and the value is fondant. So this is the core model. And this is a very simple way to view it, and I will not skip in the details now, because when we wanted to answer to the new ontology requirements, we identify 6 new things to do. For instance, the first one is we need to model biomass transformation, and we want to distinguish between food and non-food product. Then we wanted to distinguish between primary production, secondary processing, and waste. We want to be able to distinguish between the object of interest in the observation, to represent list of types of equipment on a given platform, to retrieve the replication of a process, and to identify metadata allowing traceability. And all those requirements leads us to some proposal. The first two proposal needs to reorganize the part of component food, feed, and non-food, and the last 4 concerns the evolution of the core CO2 core model. So I will start with this one. So what we need to change in the new model, and this is the actual core model PO2, and we added the PO2 has object of interest if we wanted to point to something. We also needed to add some Sosa has feature of interest, and here it's for PO2 observation. We have to add that PO2 the relation has replicate. I will not go too much into detail. It will be questions I will ask if you want. And the other 2 things that we are ongoing, there is still ongoing work, is to reorganize the component part. And here you have the different rules, component, process, step, material, method, and scale, and attribute that should be specialized in each domain ontology. And if we look closer to the component, because we needed to distinguish between living organisms and substances, we propose to have 2 branches. And the first one, living organism, we intend to align it with MCDI, and the substance part, for the substance part, we create non-food, food, biochemical constituent, and water. So this is a brand new branch, and we are using FoodX2 for feed and food, and we intend to align with FoodOn and KEBD and CDNO. So if we go closer to the branch PO2 component substance food, so the food part is finally based on FoodX2 hierarchy and includes actually more than 4,000 classes. And for the feed part, it's also based on the FoodX2 hierarchy, and it has almost 800 classes. For the non-food substance part, it includes 2,070 classes, and we had here a recyclable waste, which is based on the European waste catalog. And to sum up, we are currently building a new domain ontology PO2 transform on, which is domain ontology and for food byproducts and biomass waste. It is based, as I've shown, on a PO2 core model that can represent transformation processes, inputs and outputs, observation devices and methods. And this ontology, domain ontology is the backbone of the PO2 ecosystem of tools that we designed around this core model. And this was the thing that we wanted to put, the retrocompatibility with the existing data and the whole experience in the software development, which has been done. And in the further work this summer, we will provide URIs for this ontology, and there is still a lot of things to do to align with the other ontologies that have been already identified, but there's still work to do.
Right, and finished on the nose. Thanks, Liliana. And just to say, there's a lot of support that Liliana and Magali Weber have provided to our food process ontology group and liaising with FoodOn. So we're all really happy to be focusing on cross-referencing and EFSA FoodX2 vocabulary. Yeah, so questions from online or in the room with regard to PO2? I can say it is the working ontology out there to demonstrate the application of ontology in industrial food processing. So hats off to you guys for pioneering that. Matthew, I think.
Thanks. Oops, I didn't. Oops, I didn't. There's a big echo. Maybe Damion, you can move the mic. Okay. Okay. Thanks very much, Liliana. It's super informative. I'm wondering, you showed, I don't know, I didn't capture which slide number it was, my apologies. You showed the key value pairs for texture. And I'm just wondering about those types of outcomes and observations. Yeah, on the bottom right there, you had the fondant example. I'm wondering the vocabulary that you're using there for textures. I'm guessing maybe you also have some flavors of some types. Have you made that vocabulary part of PO2, or is that sitting somewhere else? How are you handling organoleptic properties and their categorizations and values?
There was an internship working just to define the smell, the odor, just for this, and it was 2 years ago. They study all the way that people will name the different flavors, and in French is roux des odeurs. It's three flavors, and finally, and they used specialists and tried to simplify. Finally, when they proposed it was very big, and they simplified it. So this vocabulary, and it's a hierarchy. Sorry, I don't have the final result. We want to integrate this. It was the first use case that was in the project that drives us last year. So we want to introduce this. It's just a symbolic term, and I think it's very difficult to link it with the measurements as you try to know. It's a subjective work, I think.
So that's odors, but I'm even curious about things like texture or like rheological properties, you know, the thickness, thinness, these kinds of characterizations. Do you have vocabularies for those inside of PO2?
We have about for flavor, yes, and we started about rheological properties on cheese. We started it on cheese, but I'm not sure that it will be transferable to another.
Thanks. You know, someone else can interrupt me. I have a follow-on question that's for both of you, Damion. You too, Damion. Since you're the keeper of the keys.
How about we save it to the end, because we have 2 more presentations coming.
Oh, sure.
In half an hour.
Just really quick.
Okay.
Please, because it's really relevant to this. Okay. PO2 is a food processing ontology. There is this effort for food processing. I just think for the community, can we just have a quick summary from you or both of you about why we need, you know, I'll call it yet another food processing ontology. Why is there a need for something outside of PO2? Yeah, just want to hit that.
Right.
I think it's really.
I'll just say that Obo Foundry requires certain kinds of curational patterns to happen to be inside, to be a member of it. And one of FoodOn's aims is to really be tightly Obo Foundry compatible. That's not the main reason. The main thing is that we're trying to create in alignment with Transformon, what the upper level hierarchy for a food processing, material processing, not just food processing, material processing hierarchy would look like. And so our biweekly calls on that hopefully result in a proposal to OBI that's willing to host the material processing terms under which underlying more particular terms can hang. So this all speaks to the fact that these material processing things aren't unique to food. And so we want a big chunk of those to be actually universal. And that means outside of the realm of food period, whether you're doing a recipe for paint or applesauce. So that's one other motivation. But what we want to make sure is that there will be a direct mapping if there is variance. So it's an ID issue, and it's the upper level ontology issue that's driving some of the distinction that might be possible. Oh, I mean, you're welcome to address that too.
Yeah, I was absolutely.
Okay. Okay. All right. So next up, I think let me just get my sheet open here. So yes, so Sander, please come up and you can introduce yourself. And,
hello everyone, I'm Sander Gallo. I work at Wageningen Food and Bio-Based Research in a food informatics group at the Wageningen University and Research. And I'm going to tell you something about the food safety and hazards and process ontology that we've been developing. The ontology is part of a project that I'm involved in that's called Food Safety by Design. We'll give you some background information about the project. So the European law requires that food should be safe, and therefore food manufacturers need a plan to ensure that food does not contain any health risks. And therefore information is needed on what food safety hazards are out there, and also what also is important is to know is the knowledge on the effect of the processes and preservation techniques can have to control and reduce food safety hazards. So Damion talked earlier about process can have an effect on the food ingredients, for example on the mass, but it can also have an effect on the hazard profile. Within WFBR, within our department, so we have different parties that are doing research on this. We have food safety department, but also food technology department, which are all collecting data on processes, on food safety hazards, and this data needs to be combined. Well, first, what is a food safety hazard? One definition I found is that food safety hazard is any substance or material that can work its way into any food item and cause any foodborne illness or injury to humans. Generally, these are divided in the following categories: microbiological hazards, for example, bacteria or parasites; chemical hazards, mycotoxins, pesticide residues; physical hazards, glass, dirt, even human hair can be a physical hazard. One group that is not always considered a hazard, but can be a hazard for specific groups of people, are the allergenic hazards, and then you can think of peanuts and dairy. In our research, we focus more on the first two groups, so microbiological and chemical hazards. So what information can this ontology store? We store which food safety hazards can occur in specific ingredient groups. These ingredient groups are defined by the food technology group, so they are ranging from a very general types like leafy vegetables to very specific types like processed milk. Then we also store knowledge rules on what parameters a process needs to eliminate the food safety hazards. For example, if you carry out a heating process on a food ingredient at least temperature and at least right duration, a specific hazard can be eliminated. Besides these knowledge rules, there will also be warning messages and knowledge rules on when they apply. For example, a process information to an ingredient where a microbiological hazard is present should be connected to a relevant warning message. These warning messages are introduced because sometimes there is not enough data on what effect the process is on a hazard, but there is an indication that it can affect the hazard profile of a food ingredient. So I will show a bit about the structure of the ontology. So central is the food ingredients and the hazards. They're connected with each other with two properties, depending on where your interest lies. Do you want to know what hazards a food ingredient contains, or do you want to know where a hazard can be hazardous in which what's the kind of food ingredient? Each hazard we also gave a specific hazard type. So, for example, we have a hazard called Bacillus cereus. This is as a broader type of bacteria, and within the hazard type, we even specify a broader category, which is microbiological hazards, and also for chemical hazards, the same thing. For example, mycotoxins is a more specific term for chemical hazards. Something that we are also interested in is the origin the food ingredients. That's because there's also data collected on the hazard profiles. For example, for potatoes which are coming from a side stream. This hazard profile can differ because these potatoes from the side stream are mostly considered waste, so there can be different hazards present there. Furthermore, I also connected the concepts to already existing ontologies, food ingredients to FoodOn concepts and the hazards, depending on whether it's microbiological or chemical. It's microbiological, it's connected to the NCBI taxon. If it's chemical, it's connected to the chemical ontology. The next step, I'm going to tell you something about how we store information on the processes and the parameters of the processes. So in this case, this is an example of process heating treatment. To give you some background information, heating treatment to determine whether a hazard is eliminated in heating treatment. It has certain reference parameters for temperature and duration. This relation I established here by connecting the hazard to a process parameter. The process parameter is connected to a specific process type, for in this case heating, and it's also connected to a specific quantity, and in this case it would be temperature and duration. I use the ontology of units of measure to further dig down to our measure, and then you get a numerical value and the unit. The hazard also is connected to a performance objective for heating treatment. This is because the parameter from the actual process will be entered in the calculation, as well as the reference parameters, which are connected to the hazards. The result of this calculation is a specific number which needs to be compared to this performance objective, and if it's above the performance objective, the hazard will be considered eliminated. Then I made a small design also for the warnings. A hazard. So if a process is selected and it's a specific, the warning message that we got from the researchers were dependent on the process and the hazard type, and only for microbiological or chemical hazards. So it's a very broad warning, and therefore the warning is just connected to these two classes, and depending on the process and the microbiological hazards, it will generate a warning message if there's no specific knowledge rule like with the heating. Then something else I'd like to talk about first. I'd like to say that this ontology is an application ontology, because for this project we also developed a tool where people can select ingredients and processes and their parameters. Depending on what they selected, they get to see the hazard profile of the ingredient. Because of this, I'm also experimenting with storing these knowledge rules in a shareable and also interoperable way. I started to make use of Shekel for this, but I also learned more about Swirl recently. This could also apply, and in this case, I give a shortened version of the rule for the heating treatment, because for the prestige purpose, I couldn't fit the whole calculation in this rule. So this rule basically says that it should delete if you have a knowledge graph containing information about the processor applied and the food ingredients as input. That it should delete triples from the food ingredient that contains hazards, where then it will, in the where part, it will get the parameters like the temperature of the process and the reference temperature. And based on this, it will determine if the process temperature is bigger than the reference value, then the triple food ingredient contains hazards should be deleted. This is mainly for the tool, because in the tool you first select the ingredients, and then you get a basic hazard profile before the processes are applied. After that, you can select the process and select the parameters, and based on that, it will generate a new hazard profile. And that was my talk about the food hazard process ontology. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Sander. Neat. Yay. Online and okay. So I have one. So I didn't quite catch. I could imagine you have a set of ingredients or a universe of ingredients, a whole database of ingredients, and then you have this process, and you have this knowledge that certain ingredients present a hazard if they're not treated properly. Is that right? Is that one possible use? So in other words, if you have a process that was going to cook something for 2 minutes,
yeah,
but an ingredient has a hazard on it that it needs minimum cooking 3 minutes. Was that the kind of therefore you want to delete that ingredient out of the possibility of inputs? Was that one of the reasons? I'm just missing that.
You don't want, maybe you still want the ingredients to keep in your recipe, for example. But you don't want a specific hazard in there. And then you need to know, if you cook it for so little time, then this hazard will die. So then you need, okay, I need to cook it for so long time, and then I will have a more healthy and safe product.
Okay, so when you were talking about deleting ingredient with hazard, I wasn't quite sure what was being deleted there. Was it the ingredient or the hazard on the ingredient?
The hazard on the ingredient.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
I see. So you sort of, you walk in with the universe of ingredients, do you have this or that hazard, but then you present a recipe, and then your logic can say, these are no problem. You can choose any of those.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Neat.
Could you speak a little bit more about the origins that you were talking about? Do you have like a repository of what origins could be, or are you using a different ontology to define what origins are, or
Yeah, for the moment, for this specifically, we only have 2 origins. Maybe is it as precisely or not?
Sorry.
But I specifically designed in this way, so you can also add more origins, and because maybe there is a profile changes on also different origins than whether it's precisely or not.
Yeah, I can think about like tropical soils in certain regions are higher in cadmium, so chocolate or cacao grown on cadmium-rich soils, like some kind of indicator of place-based.
Yeah. That's good suggestion. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sanders.
Okay, thank you too.
So next up is Sandra Schillo, and Sandra, just a sec. Computer's acting.
While you're doing that, can we check my sound?
Okay, yeah, sound check. Good, loud and clear. My computer's just being slow here. Just a sec. Has to do with sharing video. It doesn't like. Actually, it's being so slow that Sandra, if you could introduce yourself and proceed, that would be great. And it's okay. We can go over a little over 5, and nobody will get us in trouble for that. So take it away, Sandra. You can share your screen, I think, and yeah, here we go. It's coming up.
You got my screen? Okay. All right. I'm Sandra Schittle. And I have a massive echo. Perfect. Thank you. I'm an associate professor in innovation and entrepreneurship at the University of Ottawa. And I would like to thank the organizers for letting me present remotely here. And at the same time, I would like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. And I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous people in this region, which is the capital region of Canada, from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. So I'm not an ontology kind of person, just to kind of give that as context. But what you're seeing here is actually the work of a pretty large team. Most of the work was led by Tenyu Yang, who's a recent graduate and incoming associate professor at the University of Cincinnati. And then you'll see a sub-team here around IC Foods. I'm glad that, I think I saw Giorgio online earlier and Matthew. And then there's a team around an icicle, like a project called Icicle, with a team from the University of Utah, and then the University of Ottawa team. I'd also like to acknowledge the support granted through SHIRK and a project led by Laurette Dubé, who was also online at least earlier. Okay, so with all that, so what am I doing here? We were trying to look at classifying organizations in the food system. So we're not at the ingredient or product level, but really looking at the organizations and trying to see if we can automate some of the work that needs to be done to identify these organizations. We had 2 classification tasks. I'm going to kind of speed up and condense this a little bit here. The part that I'm particularly excited about is item number 3, is how we use Google search to achieve some good results. I think the part that our computer science colleagues are more interested in, or excited about, is the use of language models. So I'll try to do both justice. So as I said, actually, some of my work, or a lot of my work leading up to this, is like it started out, we were trying to see if we can develop innovation indicators from web sources. So for example, from company websites. This has to do with response rates, or response burden rather. And, really our intent was to see if we can find a way to automate that. And then we started looking at sustainability issues as well. And Patrick and Alan on the author team here in particular, they had done some background work on that. And because things are changing so fast in the food systems, and because there's so much work being done, as we've seen here all day, populating ontologies and so on, our question was, can we use some AI techniques to complement what is being done? So the first task that we did here is identifying environmental issues. And we had a base data set for that. Well, first we had the ontology, the Peapod ontology, brought in by our collaborators. And they actually had taken about around 2,000 organizations that were associated with 44 high-level environmental issues. And those were categorized already. And our question then became, can we automatically identify the potential environmental issues for any specific organization? The data set we had comprised 870 organizations, and we took, to kind of just work with what we had here, we took the 15 most common environmental issues. You'll see a little bit later why that was necessary. And our goal here was to predict the environmental issues associated with given organization based on the manual labels we had from our colleagues. Just to give you kind of like an example here, So the organizations here in the table on the right might be American Rivers or Rebuild North Bay Foundation or Heal the Ocean, and you can see how they relate to the environmental issues on the left. The second classification task that we tackle is one that we've come across in our work a number of times. We usually work with something called the NAICS codes, the North American Industry Classification. In this case, we had access to data for the SIG codes, which are older codes, but essentially the same. They characterize industry, or they classify organizations into industries. So we had data on that. And we had a data set here of 5,400 organizations, and we had 27 codes, and each code had around 200 associated organizations. So our task here was then to automatically predict the 2-digit SIG code given a specific organization. And here you've got some examples on what the codes look like. So you might have, related to food here on the top right, eating and drinking places, but it also comprises all the other industrial activities that there are. So the part, again, that I said I'm excited about here is how we actually managed to then do the classification. So on the one hand, it's the way we use Google search, on the other hand, the language models. Part of the reason we kind of had to get a bit creative here is we had several approaches. So for example, we have developed a web scraper that we have used very successfully in other contexts. But in this case, not all the organizations had web pages. There were also a lot of sites that didn't allow us to automatically download their sites. And also we kind of wanted to see what else is possible, what other approaches we can use. So the team came up with the idea of using Google search, and in particular, the search results. So like basically what you would do when you type in a Google search and you kind of bring up an organization, like there's a text snippet that comes up at first, like that comes up with the results that you see, and we use that as the text that we used. That doesn't necessarily have to be the official website for the organization, which is an advantage because some of the organizations don't have websites. But a lot of the time, the official website does come up in the first couple of hits. So what we then did is an example for that. If you take 5-bar beef, the snippets you get here is this little text here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the text highlighted in the red boxes here that Google gives you to kind of describe the website to see, usually for a human, it would be to see whether that's a relevant site. So we use those and we just put them together. And we use that as our pseudo document that we're using for this organization. Specifically, we took the top 10 websites. Anyways, don't need the details, but we take those snippets and we put them together. The other thing that we did is after that, we kind of need to classify it. And the typical way of doing that is using language models. So in natural language processing, NLP, there are pre-trained language models, which have become pretty popular. And in particular, BERT is one that is extremely popular right now. We've used it for a number of other projects as well. And we've applied that here as well. So what BERT does, or what we tried is we tried 2 models. So number 1, we took our organization text, those snippets that I just showed you. And the second model we also used the label descriptions for the labels. So we used those and found that when we did the environmental issues classification results, we actually got reasonable results. I mean, they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but this is something that actually is good enough to be used. And we're seeing that when we use those descriptions here, that's said on the page 4 here, we actually got somewhat better results. For the and one issue, of course, and we have that anytime we do these kind of classification tasks, is when we have low frequency issues, it's much harder to get those right than when we have high frequency issues. So the issues that don't come up very often are harder to classify. For the industry code classification, we also had usable results. And again, the second model performed better than the first one. What stood out for me in particular is that we compared using these Google snippets with industry filings. So there's a document called a 10K filing, which is like a document each organization of a certain size has to file. And a lot of the time that's a little bit like a gold standard. And actually in our case, at least the way we extracted the information from the 10K filings, our Google search method actually performed better than using the 10K filings. So to me, that was pretty exciting because the Google search is pretty accessible to anyone. It can be expanded. So just to summarize, our methods do not rely on expert effort to select appropriate text for organizations, which would have been the issue, for example, with the 10K filings, but really it's something that can be used widely, and we want to you know, further the method and apply to other cases as well. So there, probably a minute or two over 5 here, but I do know you have a stop here, and I'm going to just stop here and thank you for the opportunity to present. Damion, did I do okay for time here?
Great. Yes, thank you, Cassandra. And it's neat to see this confluence of trying to learn more about the food industry through techniques that wind their way around to the ontology world. I know there was mention of an ontology. Was that a PPOD classification system?
Yeah, and that was the starting point. I could, you know, I would love to kind of explore other links here, like, you know, using some of the work that you've done, or I mean, transform on or whatever, to see. Now we're at the organization level, so we'll have to kind of look at, like, oh, that would be the part that's interesting to see. Because the next thing we want to do is go down to the product and then obviously ingredient level, but making the link between products and organizations is probably the next step we want to be taking on. So yes, relying more on ontologies there will probably be quite useful. Matthew, do you want to jump in?
Great job. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that there's another not quite ontology that we've been playing around with using, which is the sustainable vocabulary, and looking at, we don't have results on that yet, but so not just looking at products, but also looking at you know, how are companies addressing sustainability and things like this. So ontologies around food mashed up with ontologies around sustainability, mashed up with the food system, like PPOD type ontologies, I think is really where we're going to see this work advance.
Mm-hmm. And I probably should have also mentioned, we're also, like, my group is also part of a Canadian platform that links, a digital platform that links food and beverage processors. So like bringing together the sustainability and then the processing piece, and then the product and the organizational piece would actually really promptly help us develop both industry insights, and then also perhaps, you know, ideally down the road, identify opportunities for innovation in the sector, perhaps for improvements with regards to sustainability, and yeah, and working with the food and beverage processors as well would be a great opportunity there.
Might be that the product offerings that companies have, that if connecting those to the companies is actually a better descriptor of what they actually do than the corporate spiel that they might have on their website.
Absolutely.
Well, yes, well, it's both the corporate spiel. It's also, there's an issue with the NAICS codes or SAC classifications. and that they're at the corporate level, but you can have several NAICS codes, and like those are official tax documents actually. So it's probably not so much marketing. So we have another project where we're looking at marketing versus actual, but the issue I think is mostly that there's a diversity of products, and these things change quickly. Like if you think about meat alternatives, for example, I mean, there's new products arising all the time. So those are not going to be in the tax classification or in the NAICS codes, for another 10 years or something like that. So bringing that together will probably be very helpful.
All right. Well, we'll try to get those new product categories into FoodOn to help you out there. Okay. Any other questions from the floor? No. Okay. So thanks, folks, everybody online and here in the room for another year of the IFOW 2023. And look forward to seeing you perhaps next year or maybe the year after. But let's start planning for it. And we're just wrapping up. So good. Okay. Ciao, folks. And it's been great to hear all the presentations and all of your questions. I'll add some follow-up information to that Google Doc, both for slides and so on, and package that into an email, a follow-up email. Right. So thanks a lot, folks.
Thanks,
Thank
Damion,
you.
for organizing and hosting and everything. It was awesome.
You bet.
Great work.
Okay. Ciao.